Story Peter Pan. Let's listen the story. In his London home, Mr. Darling was in a frightful temper. He was late for a dinner party and discovered that the children had drawn a map of Neverland on his dinner jacket. He scolded his daughter, Wendy. Of all the childish fiddle-faddle, Neverland indeed. You are getting too old for the nursery, young lady. From tomorrow onwards, there will be no more of these Peter Pan stories, he said. Before her parents left, Wendy begged her mother to leave the nursery window open so that Peter Pan could come. Not long after, a silhouette emerged at the window. It was Peter Pan with his little pixie, Tinker Bell. Peter Pan had come in search of his shadow and saw it flying around the nursery. He chased it near the sleeping children, making enough noise to wake up Wendy. "Why, it's Peter Pan!" she cried. "Let me see one your shadow for you." While she did that, after Peter Pan played his flute and told her all about Neverland, where children never have to grow up, Wendy's little brothers, Michael and John, woke up to the sound of strange music. Peter Pan was testing his new shadow. "Now we are ready to go to Neverland," he cried. "But you must first learn to fly." Peter sprinkled them with pixie dust, and instantly he and Tinker Bell were off with Wendy, Michael, and John. After a long flight, they arrived in sight of Neverland. They gazed at the Mermaid Lagoon and the Indian camp and Captain Hook and his pirate ship, the Jolly Roger. "Yes, it's just like I have always imagined," sighed Wendy as they sat on a cloud and dreamily looked down at the spectacular view below. Captain Hook had only two enemies, Peter Pan and a hungry crocodile that followed him everywhere. Hook had fed the crocodile a cloak so that he could hear it sneaking up on him. Now his mate Smee was trying to wave off the crocodile while Hook shook with fear. Just then Captain Hook spotted Peter Pan. "Prepare for action," he shouted to his crew. "Tink and Peter, take Wendy and the boys to the island. I will deal with Captain Hook." The pixie led Wendy toward Peter Pan's hideout in a hollow tree. The boys went to see the Indians and marched off with the lost boys. But the Indians captured them. The Indian chief bellowed, "Where is Princess Tiger Lily? If Tiger Lily not back by sunset, you burn at the stake." The children prayed that Peter Pan would come and save them. Meanwhile, Peter Pan was showing Wendy the Mermaid Lagoon. The lovely mermaids were sitting on rocks, combing their hair. They waved hello to Peter. Wendy and Peter waved back. Suddenly, they heard the oars of a rowing boat splashing in the water. Peter and Wendy spied Captain Hook and Smee in a boat with a young Indian girl. "Wendy, they have captured Princess Tiger Lily. We must rescue her," he cried. Captain Hook was threatening Tiger Lily into telling him where Peter Pan's hiding place was, but she refused. Just then Peter Pan leaped up to save Tiger Lily. Hook drew his sword, but Peter was too nimble. He pranced around and dodged the sword. Finally, Peter Pan rescued Tiger Lily. leaving Captain Hook and Smee desperately rowing away with the crocodile in hot pursuit. Peter flew swiftly to the Indian camp to return the little princess to her father. The chief immediately released the boys. That night there was a great celebration in the Indian camp. A fire was lit and everyone danced around it, chanting Indian war songs. Tinker Bell, meanwhile, was feeling very lonely. She was still lost in her thoughts of how she could get rid of Wendy to have Peter to herself. When Smee crept up behind and tapped her. "Sorry, Captain Hook's orders. He wants to have a little talk with you," he said. Peter flew swiftly to the Indian camp to return the little princess to her father. The chief immediately released the boys. That night there was a great celebration in the Indian camp. A fire was lit, and everyone danced around it, chanting Indian war songs. Tinker Bell, meanwhile, was feeling very lonely. She was still lost in her thoughts of how she could get rid of Wendy to have Peter to herself. When Smee crept up behind and tapped her, "Sorry, Captain Cook's orders. He wants to have a little talk with you," he said. On the pirate ship, Captain Hook smiled at Tinker Bell and said, "I will help you to get rid of Wendy if you tell me where Peter Pan's hideout is." Tinker Bell wanted to get rid of Wendy, so she showed Hook the hiding place on the map, under the hangman's tree. At the hideout, Wendy was singing a song that made everyone think of their homes. They were all homesick, except for Peter. "If you go back, you will grow up. You can never return to Neverland," he said. But the children took their leave. Little did they know what lay ahead. As the children came out, they were seized by the pirates. Wendy was the last one out. She hated to leave Peter, and to her horror, she saw that the boys had been captured. She too was tied up and taken to the ship. On the ship, Hook sent a package to Peter's hiding place. He sneered to Smee, "This bomb will blast him out of Neverland forever." Tinker Bell, who had been locked into a lantern, heard his plan and realized that she had betrayed Peter Pan. She hurled herself against the lantern, broke it, and flew off to save Peter Pan's life. Peter Pan had started to unwrap the parcel when Tinker Bell snatched it away. Boom! The bomb exploded. On the ship, Captain Hook smiled and said, "Stay with us or you will have to take a trip to the bottom of the ocean." Wendy declared, "I would rather walk the plank." To Wendy's relief, Peter caught her as they dropped down. Tinker Bell had told him about the captive children. Peter Pan drew his dagger and swooped down. Hook couldn't believe his enemy was still alive. Peter Pan. It can't be," he stammered. A battle raged on the Jolly Roger. Tinker Bell had released the boys. Wendy started pelting the pirates with stones. On the deck, Peter Pan fought with Captain Hook till Hook lost his balance and fell into the water, right down into a hungry crocodile's waiting jaws. Then Peter Pan asked Tinker Bell to cover the Jolly Roger with pixie dust. The ship transformed itself into a golden galleon. and soared towards London. It was time to say goodbye to Peter Pan. Back in London, Mr. and Mrs. Darling returned home from partying. Peter Pan just brought us back from Neverland, Wendy said. Mrs. Darling cried, "Look up!" They looked up and saw a sparkling cloud in the shape of a boat, crossing the moon's face. "I have seen that ship before," said Mr. Darling. "Long ago, when I was quite young."